Hey, John.
Oh, look at you in red.
So I guess we're both wearing red in support of the Welsh rugby team. Is that right?
That must be it. That must be it. Is the I didn't even know that. Is the Welsh rugby colors the red? So
Always red. Exciting news. Last Saturday we played Japan at rugby.
tell me you won.
18 games in a row we've now lost.
When Wales loses to Japan in rugby.
Yeah, it's it's a sad day. So
Oh,
I'm hoping we're planning to play Western Samoa next. Not the whole of Samoa, don't get me wrong, just the western part of Samoa.
this is painful. I mean, this is a little bit like Canada's national sport is hockey,
Yeah.
and there aren't many countries. There's the Russian Federation. There some of the Nordic countries, and then there's the United States. But really, the only states that play hockey at a really competitive level are those on the border with Canada and New England. Um, and yet we're competitive. It's really bizarre to me. Um, but still, when the United States beats Canada, that's a little in hockey. That's a little bit like Japan beating Wales. Anyway, I'm all in support of the Reds. I feel terrible that the Welsh rugby hasn't Rowling been a become a real rugby fan.
Yeah, she has. So she supports the Scottish rugby team, which also is not doing well, but I have to say markedly better than the Welsh rugby team.
There's pictures of her standing next to rugby players, and it is a revelation.
Oh yeah.
Because when she does interviews, there's a rule they must put telephone books on her chair or something like that. She always looks like she's at least 5'9", 5'10". When she's standing even in heels next to these
Oh
rugby
yeah.
players,
And you know that she wears 3-inch heels for comfort when she's going out. Ugh. So
anyway.
so it's the Ribetto. We're into the
Yeah, that's that's
finale.
that's why I put this on. This is Rufus Scrimgrauer, Rubius Hagrid, and
Yeah.
Fred Weasley here. This is the colors for Deathly Hallows. Um, but but tell me about uh, what Rowling was. Anyway, what are we doing here? In
So
case
this
someone
is
just
the
dropped out of the sky
yeah.
and decided to drop in at the last, Harry Potter installment of this story. What are we doing here, Nick?
Well, so I'm sat out by this beautiful lake in South Wales because I'm avoiding my Japanese colleagues, and I'm I'm here to talk about the lake inspiration, which is Rowling's metaphor for her creative process. So the lake is where her subconscious, her unresolved issues deliver an idea to her. And then she takes that idea over to John in Oklahoma, where he's in his shed. And that is where she applies her artistry to what she's doing.
I've seen pictures of her shed. It's a little better appointed than mine. You know.
Yeah, it is. So she has a writing room in her garden, and it's she's spoken about this on a radio program with Simon Armitage, who is our poet laureate and a lovely, lovely chap. If you get a chance to listen to that interview, um, we've only ever seen really photographs of her coffee table in there. And her windows when there's a dog either trying to come in or go out, or there's a spider. But she's talked about she has a small lavatory in there and a sink so that she can make teas and coffees.
I'm pretty sure there's some HVAC in there as well. I don't think this is
Yeah,
like my shed. I
although
got I've got my my box here of the air conditioner that is in my window in the house. All I have is the box out here that the daddy long legs are crawling
I,
on.
I'm almost certain she's got some kind of heating out there. I don't know how much air conditioning is required in Edinburgh garden room.
Yeah, when 20 degrees is your average temperature, I'd be 20 degrees. Anyway, uh, Anyway, we're doing the Lake in the Shed review of all of
Yeah.
her work in honor of her Kanreki, her 60th birthday. The Japanese rugby players that Nick is avoiding, they understand that a lifetime is 60 years. The 5 elements and the 12 astrological animals of Chinese astrology. When you come to the end of 60 years, you start again in the year of your birth. What is you're a metal dog, aren't you?
I'm a metal dog, which I only found out the other day, John, because you told me.
I found out that we are brothers in metal. I am a metal ox. I'm a metal ox.
I take a very Cormoran strike attitude to all kinds of astrology.
But you should know that we're also twins in that we were born 9 years apart, and the distinguished the characteristic or signature Japanese astrology as opposed to Chinese astrology is 9-star key. And that's a 9-year cycle. And we are both 3 tree denizens. More than you wanted to know, Nick. But that more than certainly our listeners wanted to know. Maybe you can edit all this out. Anyway, Deathly Hallows for me was it was the peak of Pottermania, absolute madness. I was on national television repeatedly in the run-up to that story, that publication. I was invited by a one-name fandomer to go to London for the release and to speak at the Ritz at a conference at the Ritz. I pulled out at the last minute. I was talking to my daughter who was at the Virginia Military Institute as a rat, the incoming plebe, if you will. And I said I was going to London for this conference and I might meet J.K. Rowling. And as the Hermione of my clan, she said, "Oh yeah, Dad, that's a great idea. You can read the story to your sons and daughters the next time the 7th book in this series comes out." So I withdrew my plans to go to London and gave a talk at a local bookstore and read the story until they all fell asleep. But it was madness. Even the bookstore event, which had been fun for Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, it had become such an event that there were people like throwing water balloons inside the bookstore. Is there a venue where water balloons are less welcome than in a bookstore? I mean, that was pretty crazy. But it was just that crowded and everybody was there, including the people that wanted to be goofy. But I went home and I read the story and I just learned from Zosima, who was born after the publication of Goblet of Fire. He said, I never read the ending. I heard this, I listened to it on tape. I don't think I read the ending until like 5 years later. Wow. He listened to the story, but he said that night was just so engaging and enthralling that he fell asleep and thought that he'd heard the end. I think he fell asleep right in the middle of the camping trip, with the camping trip that never seemed to end. Yeah. But I do have an artifact here, Nick. I mean, I have my copy of the book, which, like all the other ones, is colored with illustration. And that's fun. Your copy of that. The children are already fighting about who gets my Harry Potter books when I die. I keep telling them that that's not happening, but I do have this by a freakish accident. One of my daughters was convinced that, I guess maybe when I was still planning to go to London, that she wouldn't get a copy on the day of publication because whatever. And so she ordered a copy of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. You see that there? Yeah. And Amazon, has a box here. It says, "Attention Muggles, do not deliver or open before July 21." Right? And has the Grand Prix thing. I mean, it really was. It was a hoot. And I've never opened it. year 7.
Wow.
And my fantasy for a long time was that I would get, Joanne Murray to autograph this someday, and then I would, I could retire. I could just sell this on eBay as the only Joanne Murray autographed, copy of
Unopened. Yeah.
unopened box. But it's been a long time, Nick, and she hasn't come to call. She hasn't asked me up to her shed.
We haven't had
got
the
my
invite
shed.
to the
She's got her
party.
shed.
We haven't had the invite for the party yet, but there's time.
There's still time.
Yeah, there's still time.
I have my doubts. She's already out of the UK time zone. She's sailing around a yacht in New Zealand or something, and I'm in the shed here in Oklahoma. It's hot. It's warm out here. Okay. So that's where I was. You, of course, just got to the end of Half-Blood Prince, and it says, "Would you like to buy the next one?"
It did say that. This is the only one where I hesitated to press that button because I knew it was the last book, and I wonder how many people felt the same way on the midnight release, clutching their copies. They wanted to start it, but they didn't want to finish it. So I remember instead of going straight into the next book, there were a couple of films that I watched. So I watched the documentary Harry Potter and Me. I watched A Year in the Life. I started very gently looking at websites. I found your website. I didn't look too deeply because, of course, I hadn't read Deathly Hallows yet, and I didn't want to know what the end was. But it's probably
in 2018, Nick. We weren't very shy about spoilers on Deathly Hallows.
I know. So I think I'd waited a fortnight after finishing Half-Blood Prince before I started Deathly Hallows.
Well, I can tell you the worry, the hesitation in opening Deathly Hallows was, is this going to be the greatest disappointment in literary history?
Can you imagine the pressure? Can you imagine the pressure Joe must have been under? There's
pictures of her in that video you talked about, her writing the last pages at the hotel.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was that much pressure because, again, the entire series from Philosopher's Stone was scripted to take us to Deathly Hallows. She alone in the world was confident that it was going to end on a real powerful note. I mean, she has, when she's writing the scenes with Norbert, she knows about that dragon in the basement at Gringotts.
Yeah.
She's got that whole organization done. And I think there's 40 parallels between Philosopher's Stone and Deathly Hallows as being the ring latch. Yeah. So no, I don't think she was worried. I don't think she was feeling the pressure. I mean, it had, as you said, she had her own security firm protecting her at that point. So it's a different thing. But she said when she started to write Half-Blood Prince, she said, "Wow, this is coming to an end. This has been my whole public life." And she had to know she would never have anything like this again in her life.
No.
And she talked about it as a grieving process again and again. Almost every interview she gave for 2 years, she talked about it being a prolonged period of adjustment after the stories, that she wasn't going to be talking about doing the dialogues between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Fascinating. It's another world. But you told me in our previous installment about Half-Blood Prince that you were going to be talking about that symbol.
Yes, the Deathly Hallows symbol. So the reason why I want to do this is it's probably Rowling at her most explicit, explaining an example of her subconscious in action. And I'm getting this from an article that Beatrice Groves wrote, and we'll add a link to that in the notes. But it came from something that Joe said during the BBC documentary to coincide with Harry Potter History of Magic. So this was a combined activity initially with the British Library, and then later that a whole exhibition moved to the States. And she says, when talking about the Deathly Hallows symbol, so I drew this picture of Professor Sprout on December the 30th, 1990. Now, as an aside, if you've seen that drawing she makes of Professor Sprout, that apparently is also another Wydeen teacher. Actually, it was the art lecturer. So she was drawing this picture. I'd been writing Potter for 6 months, so not long into her journey of creating Harry Potter. I was watching the movie The Man Who Would Be King. At some point during the time I was watching that movie and drawing this picture, my mother died 250 miles away. And I got the phone call the next day to say she had died. The Man Who Would Be King, for those who don't know, is a movie with Sean Connery and Michael Caine in it. A wonderful movie, and it seemed on UK television, it seemed to be on all the time. So I'm not surprised it was on at that moment. And it's from an old Rudyard Kipling story, and the Masonic symbol is very important in that movie. And it was literally 20 years later, so this is 2010, that I looked at the sign of the Deathly Hallows and realized how similar they were. When I saw the movie again and saw the Masonic symbol, I sort of went cold all over, and I thought, is that why the Hallows symbol is what it is? And I've got a feeling that on some deep subconscious level, they are connected. So I feel as though I sort of worked my way back over 20 years to that night, because the Potter series is hugely about loss. And I've said this before, if my mother hadn't died, I think the stories would be utterly different. So this is one of Rowling's crises. The death of her mother, the defining moment in the plotting of Harry Potter. The night her mother dies, she's watching The Man Who Would Be King. And years later, when her lake comes up with, she needs a symbol for the Deathly Hallows. Her lake inspiration dredges up this defining moment in her memory, and the symbol she constructs is visually very similar to that square and compass with the all-seeing eye in the center. It's visually very similar, but this isn't just the way she works. So her subconscious has given her this amorphous shape. She now needs to work on that in the shed and make it mean something. John, how did she do that?
Well, I want to kick back on this one, Nick. We started off this series with Philosopher's Stone, and I talked about the whole Hogwarts thing. That
Yeah.
She said, "Oh, it's from the Arboretum, and there's a lily called the Hogwarts," and I just said, baloney, girlfriend. That's crazy. It's from Molesworth. It's not from your little memory there of it's actually a weed, not a lily, but whatever. The author is not a dependable narrator. I don't doubt that she watched that. I don't think she's got fabricated memories about the death of her mother, which is a signal event in her life.
Yeah.
But there is this almost determination to sell that Anne Rowling's death was the inspiration for Harry Potter. And I think we can just say flat out that's just not true. She was 6
months in. She was 6 months into Harry Potter at that point.
And at that point, I think she was, because of what we know about the structure of the series, that she had already at least sketched what was going to happen in all 7 books. Could there have been an overlay after, that where the symbol didn't really come into play? I don't know. The symbol is so important inside. It's a backdrop really to the entire Deathly Hallows adventure. Now, first you have to know that eyes are enormously important inside Deathly Hallows. It's probably the primary symbolism of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. We get five. I hope I can remember them now. I'm only going to talk about one of them, but we start off by let's go with the one people talk about the most. The whole series we're hearing every time someone meets Harry Potter, what do they say to him? You have the eyes of your mother. You have your mother's eyes. And we finally get a resolution to that when Snape grabs him and says, "Look at me." Meaning he wants to stare into his mother's eyes one more time before he dies. Now that's a critical scene because it's the gimme. Now, we talked before about John Nettleship and the background there, but really Snape owes as much to Dora's illustrations of the Divine Comedy and what Dante looks like going through the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. And at the end of the Paradiso, he meets Beatrice, who's Aeneas. Virgil has been his guide through the first two levels. Virgil can't enter Paradise. He's a pagan. And so Beatrice, Dante's beloved, comes to Paradise, comes to the end of Purgatory, puts him through the rivers of Lethe to take away his memories, and purifies him. And by looking into her eyes, her green emerald eyes, Dante is transported to Paradise. And then each level in Paradise that he travels to, he travels by first looking into her eyes. And so when Snape, who is this Florentine alchemist, he is kind of the throwback to that entire world. When he looks into her eyes, that's the redemption, the purification, and the entry into Paradise for Severus Snape. It's the happy ending for Severus Snape. And that's the first eye symbolism you get inside there, right? And then you get the two eye pairs. You get the single eye inside the triangular fragment mirror that Harry looks into twice, and instead of seeing his eye, his capital I, that we usually see in a mirror, he sees an eyeball, an EYE. His EYD identity looks back at him, and he denies it because it looks like Dumbledore's eye. It is a Dumbledore eye, but not the Dumbledore eye. But anyway, he sees the Dumbledore eye, the single eye of Dumbledore, which is who Harry Potter is, because it's reflected in the mirror, right? And a really important symbolism there. But you don't really get that symbolism until the Malfoy Manor basement. But you also don't get it, and you also don't understand it until had to have the foil for it until the Silver Doe and Ron the Baptist appears on the scene and pulls Harry out of this lake, saves his life, and in his purification, because it really is Ron's purification. Ron's eyes turn red, whatever, like the Dark Lord's when he has to destroy the locket Horcrux. And there are two eyes inside the locket that turn into his worst possible fears and beliefs. His subconscious mind is all of a sudden externalized. And Harry, by giving him the sword of Gryffindor, the true sword of Gryffindor, Ron, of course, I'm spoiling the whole story for everybody. And he destroys those two eyes. Now, the single eye and the two eyes are a reference. I think it's Matthew 6:21 that we see at Christmas time in the graveyard in Godric's Hollow. that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The very next verse, it's the Sermon on the Mount. The very next verse is, the light of the body is the eye. If the light that is in you is, gosh, how embarrassing! I don't have this by heart here. The light of the body of the eye is, therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. How great is that darkness? If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Now that Rowling is clearly pointing to people to look up that passage and then see that eye symbolism right afterward, because the eye, the single eye of Dumbledore, bright and clear and brilliant, versus the two eyes, which are really the worst part of fallen soul psychology of the Dark Lord, that draws out all the evil of a person and to entrap them, and to destroy them, unless they can somehow eliminate those beliefs and that, confront those things. It's sort of like cognitive behavior therapy with the sword, right? And that gives us the meaning of that single eye and the double eye. The next single eye is Moody's eye. Moody's eye, after his death, is used as a door site by Dolores Umbridge, one of the creepiest gothic, sort of like 1950s horror film type things. Harry goes in the office and realizes that the eye, literally a part of the body of his mentor and protector and friend, really, is stuck in this doorway. And he blows the entire mission, right? I mean, as soon as he pops that eyeball out, it's now it's a scramble to get out of there and survive. But Harry can't do it. He can't leave, Mad Eye Moody's Mad Eye there in the door. And that eyeball has, as I'll explain in a minute, has really the key to all the eyeballs inside the story. But the eye I want to talk about today is that symbol. Which Rowling, it's a triangulated and bisected circle, which is referred to twice in the books as a triangular eye, which, it doesn't really look like an eye.
No.
Unless you're a cat, that bisected thing is just, and so her saying specifically this is a triangular eye, maybe that was a point where she understood this as the eye of providence that's in the Masonic symbol. But it is fascinating. She calls it the triangular eye because this is the gift, or the what do you call something that's left to somebody in a will? The bequeathal. This is the inheritance.
The bequest. This
is the bequest that Albus Dumbledore leaves to Hermione Jean Granger. Love it when she. I should tell you, my publisher at the time, Robert Trexler, he calls me in the middle of the night, and he says, "John, you're in the book. You're in the book." I was like, "Bob, you've been up really late. We've been doing a lot of work the last few days, but I don't think I'm in the book." And that was only because Hermione's middle name, Rowling had said in an interview where she typed out the response. He typed it out that it was Jane. Yeah. But then she made Dolores Umbridge's middle name Jane. I think she was a little upset about that dissonance, and so she made it Jean, Jean. And I think Mackenzie's middle name is Jean too, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it would be nice if it were John Granger, because what does Hermione do in that book? Hermione does what I did, and do is I'm famous as the Harry Potter guy, which is not a legacy that I really I enjoy. What I do is I talk about story and its intersection with spirituality and psychology and such. And Rowling happens to be the best possible example, because the stuff she does in the shed.
Yeah.
I don't talk that much about the stuff she does in the lake. I've really pushed back against that for years. until 2019 when she said, "This is how you have to understand my books." That understanding is I have to do what Hermione does in Deathly Hallows. Hermione spends the entire book with Tales of Beedle the Bard trying to figure out that symbol which is inside the margins of that book. It's everywhere inside that book. And of course, she sees it at Fleur and Bill's wedding, when all of a sudden in comes our crazy egg yolk, the crowd, the Lovegoods come in. Xenophilius, the lover of the strange, and the lover of the strange has this little pendant on. That interpretation of that symbol is the backdrop to the entire story, because we're trying to figure out, the mystery of the Deathly Hallows. But really, it's Rowling's key to how you read the entire series, and because she, and again, this is why someone like myself, who doesn't think of myself primarily as like an academic literary critic, I see myself much more as a junior varsity perennialist. I knew about literary alchemy because I read Martin Lings's alchemical, ideas about Shakespeare. I knew about ring composition because I was a classics major, and there's no way you get through classics without understanding chiasmus. And the soul allegory, the same thing. It's such a huge piece of. Martin Ling spends a lot more time talking about soul allegory than he does about literary alchemy. That's just a thing. It's more Titus Burckhardt that, among the perennialists, talks about alchemy. But that understanding is what made me see those things able to see those things inside Rowling's work. And I'm much more excited about talking about those things, because those tell us about what it means to be human more than their importance inside understanding Harry Potter. But anyway, Rowling gives us this gift in that she has this symbol inside the story, and she embeds inside that story the 4 layers of interpreting a symbol, which are the 4 ways we know anything. We get sense perception, and that's our data from the world around us. And that's nothing but the surface story, in any novel or film or anything like that, is just what's on the surface, just what we see and hear and feel, maybe. And that's how we know superficially, is what we can perceive. The second level is just good or bad, is the moral part. Do we flee from it or do we fight it? Is the moral of the story. And that's emotional. That's just the sense perception is just data and reflected in the surface of the story. So the good or bad side of it is advantage, disadvantage. It's opinion. And most of that's just our use of sense data to say how it affects us as individuals. Is this going to work for me, or is this not going to work for me? I need to get out of here. That's opinion. So you've got sense data, then you've got opinion and how we know things, which is the surface story and the moral of the story. And then you have the allegorical, and that's science, where you take all the data and you bleed the principle out of it. And so you get a law of some kind. You're deducting. So you're looking through the data to see the reality behind it. And that's what you're looking for. And that's what we call that science. That's sure or fixed knowledge, as opposed to the ephemera stuff that we're perceiving, or the advantage and disadvantage of the moral, of opinion. And in story, that's allegory. This stands for that. You look through the image to see the greater reality. You see the lion, and you see a noble creature of great power and strength and nobility, and you see nobility. And that becomes an image of Christ, the king of the land. And you see an eagle in the sky, and then you see a griffin who's king of heaven and earth, and you're like, oh, that must be the king of heaven and earth. But that kind of symbolism is, again, a transparency, and that's the allegorical aspect of the story. You get to the allegorical, and you think, well, that's pretty much the limit of what I can do, because most of us think that the ways of human knowing are just what we perceive, our opinion of those things, and then are really turning our reason to bear on them, and then we get the science of it. But there, of course, is another level that you have sense data, you have opinion, you have science, and then you have wisdom, which is the sublime aspect of things, which is where you actually meet and have kind of, you actually, it's not knowledge that you have, it's knowledge that you become. It's not something you can learn in a textbook. It's the difference between, what an 18-year-old knows about mathematics through his textbook versus what a man in his 80s knows about how human beings live. He's seen the sun go up and down enough times, and he's become this knowledge. And that's what's usually called the anagogical level. And that's the level of true symbolism rather than tit for tat allegory and transparencies. And Flannery O'Connor, great American writer, she said that until you get to the anagogical, literally the going back, the driving back to what's most real, what's beneath and behind and within the surface of things, the stories aren't valuable. The stories don't communicate to that faculty of soul, what Lewis called the imagination, the organ of meaning. And that here's when you finally get to it, when you experience that stuff. Now, Rowling clearly knows these 4 levels because she has the 4 levels of meaning appear inside Deathly Hallows to understand that triangular eye, that triangulated and bisected circle. And you can say that's the Masonic image, but it's really a stretch, especially when you're talking about Michael Caine and Sean Connery's version of it. It is a fun film. It is a fun film. That I'm glad I don't have the association of my mother's death hanging over a movie.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a little too much substance there for me. But you can definitely see the leg kicking that up, can't you? Anyway, that symbol inside the stories, we get all 4 of those levels. We get the surface stories thing. You get the surface response and reaction. You get the moral of the story type, Aesop's fable type thing. And then you get the allegory, tit for tat thing. And then very subtly, because the anagogical is always the most subtle, really sublime, you get that inside the story. And I'm gonna go through those, if you don't mind, really quickly. The first one is the surface level, and that's Victor Crumb at the wedding. He sees, he says, Grindelwald killed many people. My grandfather, for instance. Of course, he was never powerful in this country. They said he feared Dumbledore, and rightly, seeing how he was finished. Not this. He pointed a finger at Xenophilius. This is his symbol. I recognized it at once. Grindelwald carved it into a wall at Durmstrang. Then he was a pupil there. Some idiots copied it onto their books and clothes, thinking to shock, make themselves impressive, until those of us who had lost family members to Grindelwald taught them better. Crumb cracked his knuckles menacingly and glowered at Xenophilius. Now, that's the surface level of this symbol, which has a transcendent meaning we learn later. But that's the, if you have any friends that are Hindu, or even just native to India, this, I was at the July 4th party, and I spent the entire time talking to this man from Islamabad, no, he was from southern India. But anyway, the swastika to a Hindu is a 5,000-year-old symbol of the vertical pole and the wheel of life turning around it.
You see it all over Japan in Buddhist temples and shrines.
In Oklahoma, before statehood, the Indians were playing basketball, and you see all of their teams and their team photos. They have a picture of them holding a basketball with a swastika on it. Now, again, swastika is the Hindu term for that symbol. It's Hakenkreuz in German, but no one ever says that. They always use the Hindu term. I think the EU made the showing of the swastika illegal, right?
So it's certainly illegal in Germany. It's never been illegal in the UK. So whether they passed that law after Brexit, I'm not sure.
Well, I know that there was, all of the Hindus in Belgium and France were like, really? That's like making the cross illegal because the Ku Klux Klan burned crosses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, give me a break. A misuse of our symbol doesn't make it, necessarily evil. But that's Crumb's response. It's the surface, this means that, and I don't like it, and we're coming after you, whatever. I mean, we feel bad for Xenophilius because I guess he talks later about it. Crumb is just an idiot, but I'm like, Crumb was, he was a physical presence. That would have been rough. But then we get the moral level of that same symbol when they're talking about the story of the three brothers inside the tales of Beetle the Bard. And, here's the passage from it. This is Ron and Hermione talking about the triangular eye. After debating with Lovegood until he leaves the room to fetch dinner, Hermione, looking skeptical, tells Harry, "It's a pile of utter rubbish. This can't be what the sign really means. This must just be his weird take on it. What a waste of time." She agrees with Ron that Xenophilius Hallows' interpretation can be dismissed as wizard superstition, and the tale of the three brothers is just a morality tale. As Ron put it, that story is just one of those things you tell kids to teach them lessons, isn't it? Don't go looking for trouble. Don't pick fights. Don't go, messing around stuff that's been left alone. Just keep your head down, mind your own business, and you'll be okay. Ron and Hermione interpret the symbol within the tale as a teaching point or vehicle for training in the stock responses. It's just a moral lesson. This tale of the Beetle of the Bard, all these things. That's the moral level of meaning of that symbol, is the tales of Beetle the Bard. And it's like an Aesop fable. You get to the end of it. Actually, in Greek, it's in the beginning of it. But anyway, we read it. You get the moral at the end of the story. But then we find out through Xenophilius and Dumbledore that this is that. And Xenophilius' explanation is, "The Elder Wand," he said, and he drew a straight vertical line upon the parchment. "The Resurrection Stone," and he added a circle on top of the line. "And the Cloak of Invisibility," enclosing both line and circle in a triangle, to make the symbol that so intrigued Hermione. Together, the Deathly Hallows. And Dumbledore confirms that, later in the book. Now that's the tit for tat allegory. This stands for that.
Yeah.
And it's got a real world correspondent, and the symbol is like a road sign about that, like that lake sign behind you there. Yeah. The person drowning in the lake. If you drown in that lake, I don't know, Nick. You've got bigger issues than I think.
No, the water level at the moment, I might get my ankles a bit damp, but that's about it.
But anyway, that's the allegorical meaning, the tit for tat correspondence. And that's the science reading is, hey, this is what this story means. And it advances the story. Nothing really sublime about that. And then we get to the burial of Mad Eye in the chapter 15. It starts off chapter 15, which is a very important chapter in the book. Harry has rescued the eye of Mad Eye Moody, and he takes it out into the forest. Are they still in the Forest of Dean at this point? Anyway, early next morning,
yes.
before the other two were awake, Harry had left the tent to search the woods around them for the oldest, most gnarled, and resilient-looking tree he could find. Remember that. There in its shadow, he buried Mad Eye Moody's eye and marked the spot by gouging a small cross in the bark with his wand. It was not much, but Harry felt that Mad Eye would have much preferred this to being stuck on Dolores Umbridge's door. Then he returned to the tent to wait for the others to wake and discuss what they were going to do next. Now, this is that, I doubt many people read that paragraph and just held themselves up and said, well, there it is, the Deathly Hallows symbol. But there it is, the Deathly Hallows symbol. I must have been on my fourth or fifth reading, before I went, oh, There it is. Especially that most gnarled, oldest tree, most resilient oak tree inside the forest. That's, that's not especially opaque in terms of symbolism, right? This is the Goblin's Revenge. That's that story. The vertical line is in traditional symbolism, which is really a universal thing. It's like you're talking about the swastika being in Japan and in Oklahoma with the Native Americans. Yeah, that's a pretty universal sign, right? The Hindus haven't got a patent on that. And the same thing with the cross. The cross is a universal symbol. You find the cross represented in mosques and things. The vertical line is the world axis or the tree of life. And Harry finds the one that is the tree that is most outside of time, the most has transcended, past, present, and future, most durable thing, and is a vertical image, meaning that it's not of the horizontal plane where everything is ephemeral and is subject to decay. This is a vertical symbol which reaches to the heavens, where things are, by definition, closer to what is eternal rather than what is ephemeral. That vertical image which bisects that circle is the eye of providence. And Americans know that eye of providence is because it's on all of our currency. At least the dollar bill has that triangle with the eye on the top of it. And that's almost certainly because of Benjamin Franklin being a Mason and Franklin Roosevelt also being a Mason and having a wild Secretary of Commerce in his first administration that put that on the bill. That eye of providence is that all of existence is God's knowledge, which is represented by his vision. And his word brings things into existence. And so here's this vertical image reaching to eternity, transcending the world, and the eye of providence pointing to really, where the world, the foundation of creation is in this eye of providence. And finally, we have the mirrored triangles. Now, in the story, that's the Mad-Eye Moody can see in all directions and can see through invisibility cloaks. It's the magical eye. And Harry takes that and he buries it in the shadow of the tree, where it's protected from the light. It's subliminal, quite literally. It's subarboreal, I guess I should say, in that it's taken away from people's sight and ability to desecrate, buried in the root of that tree, and what gives the tree its substance. Harry understands this. This is where this is going, is to the eternal memory of his friend Mad-Eye Moody, Alistair Moody. Now, the mirrored triangles in the symbol, and you really have to see them rather than as a triangle invisibility cloak. You have to see that as two triangles, two right triangles, because that mirrored triangle is represented in the story by Harry doing the sign of the cross. And that's the polarity without duality of existence, that you have a vertical element reaching up like the tree of life, and then you have the horizontal element that is, God's essence, his transcendent aspect, and God's energies, which bring everything in the world into existence. And that's, the cross is the symbol of everything existent, and how we have communion with God in Christ, which is, again, God's word, but much like his eye. So this is the most heavily laden symbol. And Harry, of course, Harry's not a Christian. Harry carves a cross into the tree. If he's going to go all out, why doesn't he write Alistair Moody and make it into a headstone or something? No. He wants this to be a silent memorial that reaches to God about the memory of this thing and how he understands how this man's supernatural vision is what saved his life repeatedly. This is he all of this is unconscious. All of this is subliminal to Harry. Harry is not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it's the sublime meaning of that Deathly Hallows symbol. This is about as powerful as it gets. The tree of life being the symbol or axis connecting every plane of reality with supreme reality, the absolute, the eye of providence, the symbol of creation being an effect or consequent of God's vision or knowledge, and the cross, which remember is a symbol of the center and the means to God by the resolution of contraries, which is love. And that's the message of Harry Potter, is that symbolism of the center, this heart that you have, where your heart is, where your this is that thing where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is that center that Rowling is talking about and speaking to. Harry represents that heart in the soul triptych of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Ron's the body, Hermione is the thinking intellect or the will, and Harry is that heart. His superpower is his love, his capacity to transcend the world in the sacrificial love of his mother. That symbolism of the center, we talked about this in Half-Blood Prince, is where Rowling takes the reader, and the reader who identifies with Harry takes Harry to that center in every single book, that magical place which isn't a place, and a time which stretches into eternity, really, and where he learns all things. And in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, through that symbol, we come eventually to King's Cross. We come to that symbol of Harry arriving at the center, at the mythical King's Cross, or the archetypal King's Cross, in which, and all the language, I mean, they talk about it being a train station, or a way station, but really, all the language is about palaces. It's about the kingdom of heaven. He is in Logos land, where he knows all things. Dumbledore says to him 14 times in that passage, as you know, Harry. Well, I mean, Harry doesn't know all those things. Harry comes up with these things miraculously, it seems. He doesn't have his eyeglasses. He sees for the first time, not through a glass darkly. In Logos land at King's Cross, he is at the center, the heart of all things. And then we have the final, as the dry ice smoke is coming up at the end of the King's Cross scene, and Harry's fading out to go back to the Forbidden Forest. He says, "Hey, wait a minute, is this real or is this just in my head? Because, I've been fooled in every single book. I've gotten it backwards every single time. I know how these books work. I know I'm going to have this meeting with you. I'm going to find out it's not." And Dumbledore laughs, because you're not supposed, if you think the person you're talking to is a delusion, you shouldn't be talking about what's real and not real. But anyway, he laughs at him and says, "Of course this is in your head, but why would you think it's not real? This is the reality that brings everything into existence and by which you know anything." And Rowling said she waited 17 years to write those lines, and it's because she finally delivered on what she was trying to do inside the story. None of that, Nick, comes out of her lake. The stuff that comes out of her lake is, formed a lot by the stories that she's read, certainly in the images and that kind of thing. And it has potential as story. But until she takes it into her shed and she begins to layer into, these archetypal symbols, from alchemy, from story structure, to the soul allegories, to the Christian content. And she even gives you a key inside the books. You finally get that triangular eye mirror fragment where Harry looks into the thing and sees that eye of providence, the eye of Dumbledore, looking back at him. That's who Harry Potter is and who we identify with. This Logos identity. This is, I really like the ending of the Hunger Games. Really, again, profound symbolism. She went to school at the J.K. Rowling University, and she really got it and delivered in Mockingjay a very powerful ending. One that left me disturbed a lot longer than Deathly Hallows did. Deathly Hallows comes to sort of a happy ending. Mockingjay leaves you just shattered. But anyway, other than Mockingjay, I can't think of a single story written by a contemporary author that delivered on so many levels, so powerfully, so intentionally, as does Deathly Hallows. We see a lot of it in Troubled Blood, and we see a really delightful form of it in Christmas Pig. But we haven't had 6 books leading up to it.
Oh.
We haven't had this tremendous investment where we've been looking over Harry's shoulder for so long. We really think we are Harry Potter. And so when he rises from the dead finally and vanquishes the Dark Lord by calling him to repentance, feel some remorse, buddy. See yourselves with this eye.
Yeah.
He can't do it. That he's destroyed his soul. He doesn't understand the power of a purified soul, which has really taken on this spiritual identity, this identity, EYE identity inside that triangle. That triangular eye symbolism is, I don't think in survey courses about 21st century literature that they'll have people read the entire Harry Potter series. They probably will. But if they don't, it's a shame because it's changed the way we understand story, the way a whole generation has understood themselves. It's the most powerful bit of storytelling and shed artistry that I know of. And I've talked several times this last couple of talks about how I don't want to be known as the J.K. Rowling guy or the Harry Potter expert. It's always said in a very patronizing way. Oh, you're the Harry Potter guy. Like, wow, what a nut, But I'll take that if I get some credit in future generations for having been the first guy there to say, whoa, these books were as popular as they were, not because of, marketing or if it had been marketing, I love that one. If it had been marketing, we'd have 10 Harry Potters by now. They'd have figured out how to sell these books.
Have you ever bought a book based on a poster yet?
No, I haven't. And these stories operate at such a depth, and it makes me again. I love B. Groves, and I believe me, her stuff is. You've collected all of her stuff. It's hosted at my website. That's because I want people to have access to those things. Things that B. Groves write just fade off into the nether realm. I'm glad they're all collected at our site. But that stuff about the Masonic eye.
Yeah.
Unless you really get into that, Rowling has used that triangular eye to communicate how, basically it's a guide to epistemology. It's how we, it's sense perception, opinion, allegory, science, and the sublime, the anagogical. And she presents that inside the story, how people understand that symbol. I mean, it's a masterclass. And talking about, if someone says, "Oh yeah, but it's really just this Masonic symbol," I'm like, "Well, okay."
Well, I think to be fair, on Rowling's own testimony, if you'd asked her in 2007 or 2008, "Come on, Joe, it's the Masonic symbol, isn't it?" She'd have said no.
Who knows?
She said it took 20 years for her to realize that was probably where it came from in her subconscious. No,
I've written a whole book on. Where is it? It's down here somewhere. There it is. Yeah, I've written a whole book on the Deathly Hallows, and it's probably the best thing I've written. Talking about this stuff, though, the reason I wanted to focus in on that was it talks about the heart of what Harry Potter is about, which is the heart. That essence is what makes us excited about the stories, identify with the characters, read it again and again for that resurrection experience, because that's really what we're after inside story today. The lake side of things, it's important, but not at the level of where she got Hogwarts from or where she got that symbol from. We still haven't got what was the event, what was the crisis, what was the core belief that inspired her on that stalled train to think of a boy who's a wizard who goes to school. And we know it's not the death, because she's 6 months into the planning at that point. And I have to think that she's got it already laid out on a 7-story ring. And she's, maybe she hasn't got the Deathly Hallows symbol, which it's maybe people will say that's too sheddy, but it works so well. I don't think it's too sheady. I
No,
think
no, no. I'm in agreement with you there. So, as part of our campaign to stop people knowing you as the Harry Potter guy, we haven't got any more Harry Potter books.
Oh, yay! We do
We
have those.
move on to what I think is universally acknowledged to be her finest work, my favorite book, and the book that started my J.K. Rowling Hogwarts Professor journey, Casual Vacancy.
Well, Casual Vacancy is certainly the most underappreciated of her books. I will give you that in terms of the most, and I will say that it has tremendous value in for the Lake understanding of J.K. Rowling. Once she said, "You can't understand my works really until you get to the Lake." Wow, Casual Vacancy is the most wildly transparently biographical piece that she's ever written. And that was evident at the time. And I really denied it because I didn't want to go to the lake thing. I wanted to touch much more about the Good Samaritan. But really, yeah, we have to lean into the lake thing. You said you were going to do a geographical thing on this?
Yeah, I need to check back on that video. So we talked about it on the introductory shoot, and I firmly believe that when I said that, I was gonna look at the most biographically indebted book that she's written to date. I think John's eyes rolled back so far they're in the back of his head. If they didn't, he deserves it. That's a bit of a cop out. Although it is a prod to me. The geography I think is important, and I think there's some fascinating work that needs to be done on the correspondence between Tutshill and Pagford. And look out for a post that I aim to complete on Hogwarts Professor for that. But no, I can't not for Lake inspiration for our Casual Vacancy episode. I'm going to be looking at Bad Dad.
Wow. And Peter Rowling embraces it, or at least he says. Anyway, I don't want to. Yeah, the Bad Dad of Casual Vacancy is legend. Now there is Bad Dad in everything she writes. It is a golden thread that is, from Tom Riddle Sr. to the bad dad who is murdered by his daughter in Running Grave. Spoiler alert. Really from the very beginning to the very end, it's the bad dad.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to what but there's so much you could do. Every woman inside the story.
Yeah.
Is a Rowling.
There is. I mean, we could do one video every day this month on biographical allusions within Casual Vacancy. But
exactly 6 people would watch it. Almost.
Yeah.
Most of whom are related to us.
And always leave the audience wanting more.
What am I going to talk about? I think I said I was going to talk about the Good Samaritan because it is. There is sublimity inside Casual Vacancy, enough to hook you at least, to make you think, wow, there's something about this author. Because as I think you noted, I don't know if it's privately or publicly, you've said to me, you were having a very rough year and you identify with all these miserable characters leading miserable lives. Wow. I want to talk about the Christian elements of Casual Vacancy, which are obscure at best, and yet they're the undertow of the book.
Yeah, that
make the ending as tragic as it is. All right, this it's. I have to go change my T-shirt. I got soaked it. This is. I hope the temperatures don't get too much warmer there for you in Wales.
I think I can hear my Japanese colleagues approaching. So I'm going to get out of here.
My T-shirt. There it is.
See you tomorrow.
That's
John.
right. Have a good one. Casual Vacancy up next.